Welcome to Didn't Get the Memo, a podcast dedicated to interviewing and gaining insight from ultra successful individuals who departed from convention to achieve their success. So you're doing all right in properties. You're developing. You've got your rental portfolio, and then 2008, Lehman comes along. 2008, wasn't it?
2008, Lehman Brothers crash. Yeah,
how does that impact you?
Well, I mean, I was sort of coming to an end. I built a couple of sort of 7,000 square foot dwellings in a place called Cobham, which is where Chelsea Football Club, they just moved there, so the prices were going crazy. We sort of got wind of what was going on and there might be a turn in the market, but we were just sort of exchanging on both of those properties. At the time, I think they were around 2.5–3 million quid.
Exchanging to sell them?
Exchanging to sell.
Right.
So we were, you know, when I say we, I'm in Churchill Homes, very fortunate. Those were signed up as the crash happened. So, and no one really knew how bad it was going to be. It was only really sort of 3 or 4 months later, long after the money was in the bank.
Because we'd never seen anything like that, I suppose, in our time, right? We would have seen, you know, crashes and what have you, but nothing like to the extent of Lehman.
No, I mean, it affected the share, everyone was talking about the banks crashing, Lloyd's even, and they were talking, you know, what's going to happen, the government bailout. So there was all that going on. It was a very uncertain time. So it was quite scary. I mean, I was fortunate because as I said, I was really about timing, and I'd cashed in on some properties that I had. And I mean, I still had the portfolio, the rental portfolio, but that wasn't really relevant because I wasn't going to market. Yeah. So it was, in fact, it drove the rentals went doing very well. So I had a bit of cash and the rental market had gone up. So it's actually
like win-win, really.
Well, really, yeah. I mean,
Thank you, Lehman.
I seem to do all right in downturns of markets, but that's just how it's been. I don't know if that's, you know, I don't know if I've done that consciously but that's basically what happened. Yeah, in 2008, the crash led me to start thinking, what else might I get involved with? Because property market was finished, in effect. You couldn't be buying any land or doing any development.
So what's your thinking then? And again, just trying to understand your thought process in times of, there was adverse times for many people. You were fortunate that you had cash at bank, you had an income coming through your rental properties, but still you needed to pivot and do something else. So what was your thought process at that time?
Well, I mean, I was sort of taking a little bit of a holiday. I was thinking, I was actually quite concerned, you know, what will I do? Because I can't sit on my arse for 2 or 3 years waiting for this to recover. And I had a lot of friends who were driving Ferraris and Rolls Royces going back up to St George's Hills in Weybridge to their £5 million mansions, who were sitting there with me having a coffee with me saying, I can't believe what's happening, James. You know what I mean? My loans have been called in. I can't even get an overdraft anymore at the bank. Can't afford to pay the children's school fees. Cancelled the holiday. I was thinking, is this right? These guys have been like, they're made
like financial heroes.
Yeah, exactly. And I was thinking, this doesn't sound correct. And a lot of them got ruined really by the situation and the banks, because the banks obviously tightened up, called a lot of the loans in, ruined a lot of good people, to be honest. And I thought, well, actually, look, I could probably step in here. And then I started thinking about how could I lend some of these guys some money securely. And the more I looked into it, I thought, well, they've all got cars. I thought the cars really was because it was my field of expertise.
And these were unencumbered cars, were they?
Well, some of them were, some weren't. I mean, I could only do the ones that weren't, or I would have to pay the finance companies and then sit behind them. So started looking at that as an option. Then I thought, well, actually, if I'm going to do the cars, I could do if they've got a piece of art, I might be able to do that, or a wine collection. And I thought, well, if I'm going to do that, I might as well just do everything that they've got. But I don't really know a lot about everything. And I looked at the sort of pawnbroking sector, and I thought, well, let's go online and have a little look if there's anyone who does high-end pawnbroking. And really, what I found was it was quite archaic in its approach to lending. You know, they'd have a little gold watch on a sort of beige website saying if you've got some gold brick. And I was thinking, this is a bit weird. Why aren't they doing? And I realised, well, they weren't really set up for it. You know, they didn't understand those sorts of assets, and they'd probably been doing what they've been doing for 100 years, and that would work well for them, and it still does work well for them. But I thought there was a gap in the market where we could do some sexier stuff, lend against these bigger assets, and that's where it all started for me.
Did you speak to anyone in the sector at all?
Well, we sort of made inroads and made inquiries, and I think we were sort of looked on as if we were not going to last too long. I was like,
Oh, what, did you tell them what you were thinking?
Well, I phoned up one of the guys on the board, and I said, look, well, how do you apply for a licence? You know, and he said, well, what are you doing? I said, well, we want to do some cars. He said, well, you know, you might want to not get involved with that. It doesn't seem like really what we do, but I'll come down and talk to you. Anyway, we pressed on and...
Try and talk you out of it?
Well, it wasn't really a talking out of it, but it was almost like you're not really going to be around for too long, mate, if you carry on like this. This is not what we do.
Yeah.
So, anyway, so I was adamant that would be a thing, that would be a service that would be required.
So you were confident in your own mind, notwithstanding what the experts, the head honchos, if you like, in the sector were telling you, you thought, you know what?
Well, the sector was telling me that it wasn't really a great idea, but you know, I knew it was something already by then that wasn't done, and I just felt that it was needed. So the fact that it wasn't done and that they were looking at it as if it wasn't really a thing or was a bit risque was actually a bonus, really, because if they thought it was all right, they would have been doing it already.
But many people, again, coming back to you now and what you're thinking and how James thinks and how he's managed to build this, and this is what I'm trying to get from this series. Many people would have listened to those who were in the know and said, you know what, it's not the right thing to do because it can't be done. You had that mental fortitude to say, do you know what, they're wrong.
Well, I told you before, I don't really listen very well, did I? So those teachers did teach me something.
That's a strength, obviously.
Well, I mean, I wasn't really, I'd made up my mind by then that this was going to be a good thing. I mean, I'd also read an article in the Times about the Americans using, people in America using art as a asset for funding. Right. So they were borrowing against their art portfolios, and I thought, well, this is interesting. This fits in with what I want to do here, and that's how it all started. Really, we went and found a little premises in Weybridge, and it all kicked off from there. I mean, it was slow. I can't tell you that we opened the door and we were flooded. You know, we sat there for months. The biggest problem was getting the word out there, and people, because no one was sitting at home thinking, oh, there's a piece of art that we bought from a gallery from 100 grand last year. We could take that to a pawnbroker. They weren't even thinking about that because you couldn't. Yeah. So the biggest challenge really was making the public aware that they had these options with their vehicles, with their wine collection, with their art, and the other assets that we dealt with at the time. Obviously, they knew about bits of gold and a bit of pawnbroking, but they didn't really give too much thought to some of the sexier assets that they had. They didn't know they could drive their Ferrari down to me, and I would exchange that for a lump of cash by the end of the day, and it was instant as well. I mean, I think the service is absolutely fantastic for people who have a short-term cash need, and in fact, it's cheaper than borrowing from a bank short term. So I'm talking about up to, the contracts are for 7 months, but if you pay the loan back within 3 months, there's no doubt it's cheaper than borrowing money from one of the big banks.
I suppose when you look at arrangement fees, this valuation, this, that, the other.
You probably won't get it anyway, but if you did jump through hoops and had a month or 6 weeks to wait for the application to go through, by the time you paid your arrangement fee, like you said, you probably might have to have life cover, all the other bolt-ons. Forget the interest rate, because that's a bit of a red herring. By the time they'd bolted you into everything else, I think we're cheaper. We're cheaper on that, especially on the larger sums. You know, if you wanted to borrow 100 grand from me for a month, it's 2,900 quid to borrow it. Where can you go and borrow 100 grand for 2,900 quid? I don't know of any.
Yeah, absolutely. And interestingly, I mean, your business, and anyone watches a show, you know, Posh Pawn, it's not a case of making money out of people's misfortune. A lot of the people who are shown on the series need that short-term cash to start businesses, to take advantage of opportunities. So you really are providing a valuable service, which is enabling people to move forward often.
Yeah, but I think, you know, the show covered all aspects of and all the different types of people that wanted to borrow money at different times in their lives. And yes, there are people that might be ill, may be made unemployed, may have had VAT issues, may have tax issues, or may have, you know, there's a whole range of reasons why you might come to us. But in a lot of cases, it was genuinely people who wanted to kickstart a business or had a business that they wanted to enlarge or make better or get another premises and thought, well, actually, I can go, I've got money. You know, there's some of them actually had money coming in or had an exit plan. And it was short term. Like I said, you know, short term funding, it's not expensive. So I can think of a client that was waiting for a house to be sold in Spain. 6 weeks later, he was back into me, paid me back. You know, it was, I mean, that or a property deal to go through or some cashing in some shares. Or so we have those types of clients. But as I said, they're not all that. You know, that some of them are genuine, just average. You know, it could be anything. It could be any reason why they might want to come into us.
So the business it evolved through adversity of the marketplace. Many people have adverse situations, hence why they come here. But those adverse situations, I don't necessarily, as I say, mean misfortune for them. It may be that their time is not quite right, so they need to plug the gap. How do you view adversity generally as a tool for success and a tool to propel you forwards?
Well, I mean, look, some businesses thrive in the adversity, and but I think the business genuinely, it's done well, even, you know, when the market's recovered. So the need for our services are there, regardless of whether there's an economic downturn. It just so happens that the phone gets a little bit busier in those times. There's no doubt about it. And that's what really, you know, inspired us to, come up with the idea in the first place. The downturn in the market and the need to fund borrowers was what inspired me to start the business. So it's no surprise that it does well in those times.
So in times of adversity, I mean, how do you deal with it generally as a person? Are you able to sort of keep your composure and move on, or many people get flustered? What's your sort of...
Well, I think, you know, I mean, it has its challenges, but I'm quite up for that, to be quite honest with you. It's quite exciting. I mean, dips and turns in the market, in terms of business, it's sort of, it's what you know, it's a great time for certain businesses anyway. I mean, there's a lot of things coming out of or off the back of downturns in markets, and particularly the pandemic.
Sure.
We've seen so many businesses that have evolved through that whole thing, and so it doesn't have to be a negative all the time.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I mean, we do quite well. The phones get busier. Obviously, the need for our service increases if there's if money's tight in the market.
Yeah.
So for us, it's not a negative.
It's not been a negative, which is a positive in a sense, right? So many people who do very well, they don't fear adversity as such. They see it as par for the course, and it's almost their friend almost, and they can and as you say, it's quite exciting, I suppose, when there's a challenge to be met, and it's rising to that challenge and finding a solution. Because if it's hard for everybody, all it takes is that one person, I suppose, to think, hold on a minute, there's an idea here, like you had. It was hard for everybody. In you know, cars couldn't put fuel in the tanks and so on. You realised there's actually an opportunity in it. And it's just a bit of head scratching, which you did. You know, I've seen it reported in other interviews with you where it's been said that you were in the right place at the right time. I think that does you down quite a bit, really, because many people were in the right place at that right time. They didn't do it, but you did. So what makes you different? How did you spot it where others didn't?
Well, I think, you know, just having the insight into that opportunity at that particular time. I mean, yes, it was a great time for this business. I'm not sure what else I would have been doing, but I think that would have been something for me. But, you know, I would have got my teeth into something, because I'm of that nature. Sitting around twiddling your thumbs isn't, you know, that's not what I do. So it just so happens the concept at that particular time, the economically it was right, and it suited my skill sets. To be honest with you, I had the finances available. It just seemed the logical move for me, but I couldn't tell you what I would be doing other than what I'm doing, but I'm sure I would have been doing something.
Sure. Okay, so that, and I suppose it's that fighter in you, right? And it's just not sitting still, it's not hanging around. in that same vein? I mean, do you ever get frightened?
Well, I can't deny that there's an edge to starting on a new venture and a certain amount of trepidation when you're entering into something that you don't fully understand. But I quite thrive on that aspect of the business, to be honest with you.
So it's a case of feel that fear and do it anyway. Whereas many will feel it and run a mile and think, too frightened.
Yeah, I'm not one for the comfort zone. It's not really my thing, to be honest with you. I know it might sound bizarre, but yeah, I thrive on the unknown and challenges, really, to be honest with you. And that's really what inspired me. I mean, I thought that it would be a challenging business. I was confident of success, but I felt that, I knew there would be challenges ahead. And I think that that all adds to the excitement, really, of what we do here, to be honest with you.
So how do you silence the fearful thoughts that you may have at the time, right? The same thoughts that could talk you out of moving forwards and propelling yourself. How do you silence those thoughts, manage them, keep them in check, and push on?
Well, look, I mean, I've got a desire to do the business in the first place. So, as I said before, your desire for gain has got to be greater than your fear for loss. And I think it's important to that carries me through. I really want to do the business. I want to find reasons to get it done, and it's a challenge. And it's not always about the pot of gold at the end. It's more, for me, it's more about the mechanics of the business, getting it to work. I didn't know anything about pawnbroking in 2008 when we first started thinking about this business, and it was a challenge for me to come into this sector and end up at the top of the tree in terms of this, in terms of pawnbroking. That's where we are now. We're considered the best. And there
But you weren't always considered that, though, really. I mean, when you first came in, people viewed you with a certain degree of skepticism.
Well, they did, but I mean, the challenge for me was I wanted to be the best. I didn't want to just be another pawnbroker in the high street. I had it in my mind that I would be the best pawnbroker in the high street, and just look around. I am. I'm not.
You're the only pawnbroker.
Who else would open a pawnbrokers in Surrey?
Around here.
Yeah. So I mean, that was always in my mind. I wanted to be at the top of the tree, and I felt that the concept, and once it got out there, that we would eventually end up in that space.
Did you really care what other people thought about you in the sector when you were setting up?
Well, I wasn't. I mean, I was a little bit sort of narked, really, with the response. It was almost sort of very dismissive of what we were trying to achieve. As soon as we got a bit of notoriety and the TV came on board and we were featured on prior to the television, Channel 4 News, BBC World News got involved. So as soon as we started getting a little bit of notoriety, then they sort of started sitting up and listening to, and wanted to really sort of converse with us and sort of exchange ideas. And some of the guys that are in the sector have adapted their business to sort of encompass some of what we do. So they've had to change. They've realised, actually, look, we're not just here for a bit of scrap gold or the odd fob watch. There's more to this, and we can achieve so much more. And that's something we are quite proud of, really. We've changed the industry and the public's perception of the industry for good.
Sure. So, I mean, you've come into an industry which is quite archaic. I mean, it's been going around. This sector has been operating, 16th century? God knows how.
Hundreds of years, yeah.
Hundreds of years. And you've made it sexy, something which is quite stale. You've made it sexy. You've dared to try something different. Do you think you would have been worse off had you grown up in the sector, for example? Do you know what I mean?
Well, I couldn't have.
Fresh eyes. You knew nothing about it. Was that a strength or a weakness?
No, I think it's 100% of a strength. Obviously, if I'd have been born to the industry through generations of pawnbroking, like a lot of them have, I would have been marred with the history and with the the conception of what we have to do to succeed. I came on board not knowing anything about the history, not knowing anything about the business and how it functioned, and really sort of came up with the concept of this sort of high-end asset lending, and it evolved from there down to all the minor details of how it works, all the checks, all the security checks, the appraisal process. All this is something that we had to evolve as we grew, and in a way, it's I think learning it from scratch or coming up with a new concept like that has been definitely an asset. There are aspects of it that you might think, well, you know, that was expensive because it took you a while to find that bit out. But
paid experience.
But there was no reference, so there was no reference point for me. It was either suck it and see, or don't bother sucking it at all. And
Sure.
I decided to suck and see.
And you stayed with it, and it's obviously doing really well. So you've got a number of locations now, and you're opening more locations as we go.
Yeah, I mean, we've got 9 locations now. We've just opened one in the city, right near the Bank of England, in Gracechurch Street, opposite Leadenhall Market. So that's great for us. That's actually where pawnbroking began in this country. So, and we're the only pawnbroker in the square mile of the city. So that's quite an important.
Was that a bit of a challenge trying to get that set up? Was there any rules as to why that hasn't happened before?
Well, I'm not sure why no one is there or doing it. I guess it's just the market, really. I'm at the top end. That's not really where they've set out, or most of the other people in the business have set out their stall. So it seems an obvious choice to me. You know, get amongst the city traders. They've got I've got a captive audience there because they're right in the city. So you know, their time is valuable. So to come in if they've got any sort of short-term cash flow issues, or if they want to buy any luxury goods, I'm right on their doorstep, and there's not much else there in the city.
So that's, you know, again, you position yourself well there. Hopefully that will do really well. So I mean, what's next for James and what's next for Prestige? What's next for the other ventures? I mean, what are you thinking of? What's on the horizon?
Well, there's so much more I can do with the brand, to be quite honest with you, and it's about timing. So at the moment, we just want to grow organically. We're looking at opening more stores. We've actually opened 4 stores during the pandemic, which is quite an achievement, which I'm proud of. So we know the next 5 to 10 years are going to be ripe for us. We're opening more and more stores in the UK. We are in talks with people that are based abroad. There's other markets that would be very good for us, and that's something on the horizon. Other than that, it's just growing and doing what we do, just on a larger scale as we grow organically. I'm not one of these ones, you know, as I like to sort of feel my feet, if you like, and sort of, as I said before, I like to keep a handle on everything. So I don't see it as a brand that is in every high street. It wouldn't work for us.
Yeah.
So yeah, just growing it and doing what we're doing and just making sure we get it right.
So what would be your advice to anyone else who's out there listening, watching, thinking, you know what, there's something I want to try, but they're a bit frightened about it. They're not quite sure they know enough about it. They don't really know the sector. It's something that excites them. However, what would you say to them? You know, what's the one thing they should really be doubling down on? Is it discipline? Is it handling their fear? Is it mindset? I mean, what was that one piece of advice you'd give that person to say?
Well, look, if you've got the finances available, it's a great industry to get involved with. You've got to have some certain skills, but if you feel you're of that nature and you're entrepreneurial and you want to give it a go, give it a go. What can you lose? I mean, it's a great business to. Well, don't put your house. I wouldn't risk your house against it for sure. It's not the easiest thing to get into nowadays, to be quite honest with you. When I first went into it, the whole setup process was much easier. The FCA regulations now are a lot stricter. There's quite a few hoops to jump through. But to be honest with you, with anything you do, if you're confident and you've got the money available to you, you know, give it a go.
So James, look, you told us a few times that you don't really listen to what other people say. It's quite obvious that you didn't listen to when people are telling you, you know what, I'm not so sure about this. You had courage of your own convictions, and perhaps those who got the memo would have done this slightly differently. Probably wouldn't have done it at all. You know, you dared to be courageous. You've gone out there. You've done something that's never been done before, and I think you are fully entitled to be saying you did not get the memo.
I certainly didn't get the memo, for sure.
Look, thanks very much. It's been brilliant, and I wish you the very best going forward. I know you're going to be a resounding success, but it's been great speaking to you.
Lovely.
Thanks.
Cheers. Thank you. Cheers.